Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this week's Global Dawah Movement Show. I'm joined in the studios by Brother Adnan Rashid. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
How are you doing, brother?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good.
Alhamdulillah. So, on this week's show, we're going to be talking about Islamic history. And I know you know a lot about this subject, inshallah. So,
I know a little.
You know a little, inshallah. So, let's get straight into it. So,
Okay.
We as Muslims, why is it important for us to study Islamic history?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. Firstly, history is important because the Quran makes a huge point out of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, in a number of places, makes history the center of his argument.
Right.
For example, Allah states, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Siru fil ard fanduru kayfa kana aqibatul mukaththibin. Go in the land and see what happened to those who came before you. Okay. Hal ataga hadithu Musa, has the story of Musa reached you? Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi'ad irama dhatil imad. Have you not seen how your God has dealt with the people of Ad and Thamud?
Yes.
So Allah gives these examples to teach a lesson to posterity that those who do not behave themselves properly, or if they don't act upon the teachings of God and His prophets, then they will suffer, they will be destroyed as all these previous nations are destroyed. So this is one of the strongest arguments in the Quran.
So there are lessons to be learned from
Absolutely. History teaches you how to learn from your past, how to live your present properly, and how to better predict your future.
Inshallah, inshallah. So, you know, when it comes to sort of Islamic history, there's a lot of misconceptions out there, especially when it comes to sort of tolerance of other minorities, peoples of other faiths. What is the actual, real understanding?
Yeah.
And the truth?
The dominant rhetoric on the news and among main media outlets is that Islam is somehow a barbaric faith. It is not clearly stated, but the insinuation is that Islam is actually intolerant of other faiths and it has been a force for bad and evil. But when we look at our history and we study it carefully, like historians have and academics have, we come to realize that Islam was actually one of the best things that happened to humanity. Why? Islam brought people together under one umbrella. For example, when Muslims came to power in Syria, in Persia, or even in India, or even Spain, for example, Muslims allowed the Jews and Christians to coexist, while previously they couldn't coexist. Christians were not allowed to live in Jerusalem.
Really?
They were not allowed to live in Palestine. And this was after Emperor Hadrian, a Roman emperor, in the year 132 CE, when the city of Jerusalem was destroyed, razed to the ground by the emperor. Jews were completely banished from this land forever. They were not allowed to return on the on pain of death, basically. So this continued even during the Christian era, and they were only allowed to come back when Muslims took power in the land of Syria or Bilad al-Sham, or Levant, if you want to call it that. So Muslims brought different faith groups together to live in peace, and some scholars even believe that some of the minor Christian sects only survived because of Muslim protection. For example, you know, when Muslims took Syria, or the land of Syria, Greater Syria, for example, Syria at the time meant Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, and the land of Syria. So in this land, we had Nestorians, Jacobites, Monophysites, different Christian groups who were heavily persecuted by the main Christian church, which was the Chalcedonian church, the Byzantine church, you know, the governing church. They were persecuting all these minor Christian sects. So Muslims came in and they said, okay, everyone lives in peace, no one attacks anyone. You all, you know, as long as you behave yourselves and pay your taxes on time and don't cause any social disturbance, there is no issue, no problem. And scholars believe, people like Thomas Arnold, for example, and others believe that it was the protection of Islam that caused these minor Christian sects to survive. For Jews, Bernard Lewis, who is a scholar, who's a Jewish scholar, he has written a book called The Jews of Islam. In this book he states that Jews, 90% of the world's Jews were protected by Muslims for over 1,000 years. For over 1,000 years, Muslims protected the Jews against Christian persecution. So Muslims were very tolerant. Because of this tolerance, a lot of these communities survived as late as the 20th century in the Muslim lands. After the creation of Israel, of course, things changed.
Yes.
Jews of Iraq, Jews of Yemen, Jews of Morocco, they started to move into Israel.
Right.
Hostility began and things changed.
Wow, so that's a completely different picture from what the sort of West paints when it talks about, Islamic.
Not all Western scholars paint that picture. No, well, we have many Western scholars who have actually come out and given the right picture. They have actually documented history as it is, rather than putting a spin to it. We have Islamophobes, we have anti-Islam activists who are out to change and distort history, but they have been unsuccessful so far.
Some people also talk about, when we talk about Islamic history, there's been periods of darkness. What can we say about those periods, and what about the periods of light as well?
It depends how you define periods of darkness and periods of light. If you mean by period of darkness where people suffered and there were massacres and hostilities,
yes.
This happened in every single civilization, where individuals break away from their traditions and start to, for their personal gains, kill
yes.
and oppress people. We had examples like that in our history. We have Timurlen, or Timur the Lame, who was a new convert,
right?
And he was a Mongol by origin,
yep.
And he wanted to be another Genghis Khan,
right?
Okay, so he didn't really care much about the Prophet Muhammad and his ways. Okay, so he wanted to revive that Mongol legacy of Genghis Khan.
Okay.
So to become Genghis Khan, he had to do things like Genghis Khan. So he committed many massacres. Actually, the people who suffered at his hand were mostly Muslims.
Right.
He is the one who captured one of the Ottoman emperors, Sultan Bayezid Yildirim. He captured him and killed him. Then he attacked the Muslim state of Delhi in India. He went as far as India. Yeah, he destroyed Delhi. He attacked Syria. Okay, he captured Damascus. He even met the historian Ibn Khaldun. He met him in person, didn't kill him, left him to live. So people like that are in our history. But did he follow Islam? No, not at all. We have other examples. Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi. We have examples of the Golden Age, for example, what we call even during the Mughal period, we have examples of tolerance where Mughal emperors allowed the Hindus to coexist with them within their courts.
Yep.
So they allowed freedom for other faiths. So what was the Golden Age? What was the enlightened age, as you put it? Okay, that age was basically, I believe, it began with the very inception of Islam.
Wow.
Okay, when Islam came out, it brought people together, it gave that sense of security and peace to the masses, where they could get together and work in harmony and produce results for the betterment of humanity. For example, many works on science, philosophy, were produced during this period. Many universities were produced in this period. Jews, Christians and Muslims were allowed to go and study free of charge in these institutions. Some of the biggest names in the Christian world as well as the Jewish world were born during this era of Golden Age in Spain, in Baghdad, in Damascus and in the Muslim lands. One of those names is Maimonides, also known as, or actually his name was Musa bin Maimun. Maimonides was the name he was known by later on. Or he's also known as Rambam to the Jewish people.
Right.
He's known as the second Moses. He was born in Cordoba during the Golden Age.
Wow.
Although he was persecuted by a hostile group that came to power in Spain known as Al-Muwahidun. But he migrated from a Muslim abode to another Muslim abode.
Right.
So where did he find refuge? He found refuge with Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi at the same time.
Wow.
And he lived in Egypt for the remaining part of his life. So we have many examples like that. We have Christian scholars, Al-Kindi was one of them, who was actually criticizing Islam, living with the Muslims in the Muslim domain. So we can give many examples of coexistence and tolerance when Muslims facilitated harmony, and that harmony produced what we know today as the Golden Age of Islam, or the civilization of Islam.
And going on to the sort of Golden Age, what about the sort of, is Europe indebted to that sort of Golden Age?
Absolutely.
Is there a link?
People have written chunky volumes on this very issue. If you want to read on this topic, I would highly recommend a book written by a man called George Sarton, who published his book titled Introduction to the History of Science. It is an introduction, but it is in 5 volumes. Can you believe? I mean, this is unbelievable. Okay, it's an introduction. It's in 5 volumes. Almost 60 to 70% of this introduction is on Islamic sciences. What Muslim scientists or what the Arabic scientists
Right.
did, and how they passed this knowledge on to the Europeans. So the European Renaissance is indebted to Islam. We have a book written by a man called George Saliba, and the book is titled The Arabic Origins of the European Renaissance. I have actually written a booklet on this very topic. It's called Islam's War on Terror.
Right.
It can be found free of charge, PDF online. If you go and put my name, Adnan Rashid, and Islam's War on Terror, the document will come up.
Fantastic.
So all of these things, or a lot of this,
Yes.
is discussed in this document.
And just to end, what can we learn from Islamic history in today's day and age? And what can we apply that will make a better society for us today?
We need to educate ourselves, primarily the Muslims. Muslims are completely, in some cases, unaware of their own history. We need to understand, learn our own history so that we can teach it to others.
Yes.
And when we do teach it to others, it brings harmony, it brings understanding, it brings mutual respect. Okay,
Right.
a lot of non-Muslims out there on social media, they get sound bites from news outlets and news reports. Daily Mail is publishing hateful stuff on Muslims.
Yes.
Sun newspaper is doing that. Sky is doing it. CNN is doing it, and people get crazy and people start to think Islam is actually barbaric. But most people, unfortunately, in this day and age, do not go outside of their mobile phones. They don't study books. They don't pick up academic works and start studying the history of Islam and what Islam did to the others. Okay, so people have to study. Muslims have to study so that they can educate others. It is very, very important for better harmony and cohesion in this current day and age.
In modern 21st century society. Jazakallah khairan for
Thank you.
Coming in today. So that was a brief introduction into Islamic history. Inshallah, we'll have future shows where we'll go into a lot more detail, especially like the Golden Age, Islamic scientists, the sort of Renaissance, European Renaissance, where a lot is indebted to the Golden Age of Islam. So Jazakallah khairan for joining us, and inshallah join us for next week's show. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.